Yeah, I think the nature of how we see the Heisman play out, coupled with the fact that, apart from two or three guys, the field is pretty wide open
Yeah.
and priced accordingly, right? Like every single year, we'll see two or three or four players that are at the award ceremony that were on
Yeah.
next to nobody's radar, right? So or rather speculating in some of these longer odds guys, right? Being able to get 20 to 1, 35 to 1, 18 to 1, even, right? Like these are the type of price tags that you want to target whenever you're talking about player versus the field type of propositions.
For
And then you
sure.
layer on top of that the fact that a lot of this is subjective, right? Like there are objective things that people can quantify, but also there's kind of a feel in terms of who actually gets these votes, and it feels like it's ripe for some pretty swingy bets to add to your profile.
I love it. And the one thing to keep in mind here too, we talk it a lot about it on our NASCAR program, is that if you bet on FanDuel, and like we're not paid to say this at all. We don't have a promo with FanDuel, but they will give you some very generous cash out offers later in the year. So if you have a 65 to 1, a 100 to 1 that they think, hey, even he might just be a finalist, you're probably getting a cash out by November. So that's something to keep in mind if you do want to take a couple of these long shots. And if you want to go with the chalk, make sure you're checking out DraftKings, which is one of our very valued betting partners. We have a promo link in this episode description. You can check them out. Deposit $10, get 200 in free bets. So hell of a deal over there. Will, I want to start with you, man. Where are you going in the Heisman Trophy odds? What are you seeing as potential value on the board for the potential winner of this award?
Yeah, it's a pretty wide open one this season, I think. I mean, I think I remember placing a Caleb Williams one last season before the season, and it was, I want to say, like plus 125. So
Holy shit.
you don't see anyone favored, or maybe 225, but you don't see anyone favored like that this season. If I was gonna go deep for a guy, if I was gonna put some money on like a deep guy, I would probably stick to NFL because I know a lot more about that than college football. But Jalen Milroe for me at plus 1,400. He's the fourth
Yep.
most favorited Heisman candidate, but he finished sixth in Heisman voting last season. And obviously, being on Alabama is going to be a helpful thing. But, they brought in the Washington head coach who had Michael Penix in that offense absolutely pumping. Michael Penix, if I'm
Yep.
not mistaken, was the runner-up, I think, for Heisman last season. So I think we could see a lot of good usage there for Jalen Milroe's case. And they have a new offensive coordinator in Nick Sheridan, who has worked with the Washington head coach. And I think that Jalen Milroe is going to be asked to throw the football a lot more this season. And obviously he lost some weapons, but I think we can all trust that Alabama is going to have some solid guys at receiver for him. So I like the Jalen Milroe case here.
Okay, Jalen Milroe is where our guy Will is going to go. Eric, where are you going here? Are you sticking with a quarterback? Do you like maybe a positional player? We know it's traditionally a quarterback award, but hey, Devonta Smith won it at one point as well.
Yeah, I am going with a quarterback. I'm gonna, like I mentioned a moment ago, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper for my speculation in these types of markets, and specifically the player that's jumping out to me is Shedeur Sanders plus
The
3,500.
Buffs.
Uh, Obviously, Colorado didn't finish the season the way that they would have liked, in a way that aligned with the amount of attention and hype that they got at the start of the season. But if you go back to those first 3, 4, 5 weeks of the year last year, there was already talk about him getting some Heisman consideration if you were able to
Yeah.
sustain that play over the course of the year. Now you fast forward one more year, he's got another year in the system. The offensive line could legitimately only get better, right? So, like, to my point earlier about how some of this is subjective and what really kind of jumps off the page for the voter's eye, if we're talking about a Colorado team that's competitive, maybe even sneaks their way into the playoff or at least is in the playoff conversation, and it comes off of the arm of Shedeur Sanders, 35 to 1 is going to look real nice if we see that play out come Christmas time or so. So not exactly a strong favorite by any means. This feels like a bit more of a quarter or half unit type of bet, but
Sure.
ultimately, I think there's a path where we can see him at least making his way into that conversation if things break in the right direction for him this year.
What I think's interesting about Sanders, Dion's son here is they open with a very favorable schedule the first 3 weeks: North Dakota State, Nebraska, Colorado State. I know I'm going to piss off some people down in Lincoln, but I'm not really buying that hype quite yet under Matt Roll and company. So I think if he starts out hot here, like I remember last year, a couple weeks into the season, Eric Shedeur being all the way down, I think 9-1 to win the Heisman. So this could be one you jump on earlier and maybe get a cash out option here by mid-September, potentially even. Baylor's going to come in week 4. I think that's going to be probably a big test for them. And then they'll see UCF and Kansas State. So it gets a little dicey there. But if they can win more games than they did last season, it could be Shedeur's time. And like we know already, NFL scouts are looking at him. They're talking about him potentially being a first-round pick. So would not shock me at all to see Shedeur Sanders here. I honestly also want to shout out Travis Hunter as well.
Yes.
Right now, Travis Hunter, 65-1 on FanDuel. I mean, this guy, there's not much analysis other than turn it on and watch for the eye test, man. Like this guy is a complete player on both sides of the ball. You don't see that a lot in college football, man. And we saw it, years ago with the guy from Michigan. Oh man, I can't remember his name now. He ended up on the Browns, didn't have a great career, but yes, Jabril Peppers. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so. And people are intrigued by this, the dual threat players people like, especially when you're playing on both sides of the ball. Travis Hunter was on a very good pace last season before taking that dirty hit against Colorado State and kind of getting sidelined for a while. So I think Hunter, just because we like different, we like intrigue. I don't think he can win it. I don't think he's going to win it, but I think maybe you get in on 65-1 and then that price goes down a little bit and then you're sitting out with a cash out. So Will, your thoughts on Colorado and the Buffs as a whole here and our long shots on both Hunter and Shedeur?
I didn't even know that you were going to say Travis Hunter because the whole time he was talking about Shedeur, I was like, I wonder what Travis Hunter's value is here because
it's a lot of the same argument, right?
Yeah.
If there's going to be a surprising Colorado team in the playoffs or something like that, I'm sure Travis Hunter would be up there in the voting with Shedeur. So I do like the Travis Hunter take.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'd also like to throw out quickly before we get out of here. I'm a favorite bettor. Eric picks on me all the time for it. I think Carson Beck, plus 750 for the favorite this season, does feel like a bit of a value. This is one you're holding all season if you do place it, though. Keep that in mind. But I think Georgia has 2 huge tests on the schedule this season. They go to Tuscaloosa and face Alabama in week 4. I kind of like them catching them earlier, though, with Kalen DeBoer kind of just settling in there as the head coach. So I think maybe they could go into Tuscaloosa, win that game. And then they face Texas later in the season at Texas in Austin. But that's after the week that they're coming off the Red Rivalry game, the Red River Rivalry game, that is, against Oklahoma. So I think maybe Texas can be a little banged up. We know they lost that game surprisingly last season to Dylan Gabriel and company. So I kind of like how he could maybe catch both these guys on that. So very interested in that. And then also everything I've seen, Georgia is the best team in the country. They lost Ladd McConkey. They lost Brock Bowers, but those guys were both hurt at different times last season. They have Dominic Lovett. They have Ra Thomas still kind of play that 1A, 1B. They also got the number 3 wide receiver in the transfer portal, London Humphreys from Vanderbilt. They also got the wide receiver 8 in the portal from Miami, Colby Young. So I think they are loaded enough to support Carson Beck here. And Eric, I think if he just goes in and he wins in Tuscaloosa and Austin, I mean, that right there builds the case for the Heisman winner coming out of Georgia here in Carson Beck.
Yeah, very, very much so, right? He wins those 2 games and he's going to be considered the favorite, and we're going to see that number slide down quite a bit, which opens the door for a public service announcement to shop around all of these numbers. Yes. I'm seeing a plus 800 number on Carson Beck right now over at DraftKings Sportsbook. I think we've got a promo code in there in our description to go speculate in these markets. And the real thing to underscore with this, you're talking about how Georgia is presumed to be, if not widely, one of the widely considered one of the favorites to be the best team in all of the land. You can actually go over to the futures market. Carson Beck plus 800 to win the Heisman, but Georgia is only plus 320 to win the national title, right? So like, if you believe that Georgia is winning the national title, Carson Beck probably has a lot to do with that, and you're getting a much more beneficial price by putting in the Heisman ticket than putting in the national title ticket.